So to be perfectly objective, the definition of abduction would have to include any event or scenario that is generated externally for the targeted person, whether it be a physical encounter, a virtual reality scenario, or a telepathic contact. Now, a second important discovery from Ted's investigation, and this was important at least for me, was the possibility of cloned human bodies produced by these abductors. And that's the second thing I'd like to talk about briefly today. In the mid-1970s, a memory of a childhood event surfaced in Ted's mind during the night while he was sleeping. And in an altered state of consciousness, he got out of bed and went to his typewriter in the middle of the night and wrote out this memory as a story. In 1991 and 92, when Ted and Barbara began a series of regressions, it popped up in these events, this scenario that Ted had recalled as a story, but a very different version of that basic story emerged. A version in which he went through what can only be called a horrific experience, in which his original body he perceived as being killed and taken away, and his essence, for lack of a better word, we could call it soul, energy, or whatever term one would like to use, was contained temporarily in a black box, placed on a counter, and transferred shortly thereafter into a cloned copy of young Ted's body. This was his perception of what occurred with him, and this is the first time I had ever heard of such things really in any detail. Now, when we made our external investigation, interviewing people who were part of Ted's family and friends at the times many of these things occurred, several pieces of corroborating items did come out, all of which I tried to present fully in the book, but just briefly, one of the most telling, for me at least, was interviewing Ted's mother. And at the time that Ted recalled being transferred into a different body, his mother recalled the suffering he went through for weeks afterwards, feeling that his body was on fire, having to soak him repeatedly in ice water, trying to bring him some comfort, and noting that the childhood diseases that Ted had had before the cloning recurred afterwards. Excuse me. The third point that I want to correlate with information from subsequent investigations in the accounts taken concerns the possible involvement of human, apparently military, personnel with certain abductees. Now, if nothing else, this involvement of some authoritative agency within our government should tell us that our decision-making powers that be, the structure that pretty much controls how we deal with this phenomenon as well as with everything else going on in our society, takes this phenomenon very seriously. I would guess that most of you here have already learned about the many hard pieces of evidence that do reveal the government's knowledge of and involvement with the UFO question. Such classic presentations as those in Clear Intent and Above Top Secret can point you in the direction of getting your hands on the paperwork generated by the government that makes it very clear they have involvement they have never been willing to discuss with the public. Now, the evidence for military involvement with abductees, I will admit, is much less well documented, certainly, but for the individuals who are on the receiving end of this activity, it is very compelling and very traumatic. There are two basically different bodies of data relating to the possibility of human involvement. Now, the first body of data includes such external things as phone taps, mail interference, unidentified human agents who photograph the homes of abductees, photograph abductees themselves and follow them, sometimes even breaking into their homes, making threatening phone calls, apparently able to make certain medical records disappear, also alleged alien artifacts disappear, and it goes all the way to the extent of direct confrontations between the military personnel and certain abductees. sometimes to the extent of abducting the person and using a number of interrogation techniques to elicit information about the person's activities with the aliens. Now, Ted Rice has not been the overt target of such involvement, but the accounts of the 8 women in Taken, which we'll get to in just a few moments, show that 4 of the 8 women have had a variety of these experiences in their own series of events. But the second body of data concerning human involvement deals with facilities, typically underground, in which aliens are often seen to be working with human, military, and scientific personnel. For me, and I think for all of us, probably the big question is whether these facilities and this level of cooperation actually exist, or if abductees report these events because they've been presented with some type of unreal scenario, much as we're presented with the showing of a movie when we go to a theater. Until we have located such a facility, externally verified its existence, and exposed the activities going on there that abductees report, this question's got to remain open. All we can say for sure is this: a number of unrelated accounts include descriptions of such facilities, usually with reference to either scientific or military activity, although there is a third set of reports that describes something much more disturbing, and this is one of the things that turned up in the case with Ted and with certain others who are part of a great deal of investigative activity on Barbara's part and my part, that are, well, I'll just try to give you a little brief scenario of what Ted consciously recalled about this third type of human underground facility. In the mid-1980s, Ted awoke one morning with conscious memories of an altered state event that occurred during the night. He was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time, and part of the journey that he recalled from the night before included flying over a fairly desert area to a remote compound where many people were herded together. He didn't remember being involved in any actual activity, but only in seeing several areas that were accessed through this above-ground compound into a large underground installation. He remembered consciously that the humans in the compound seemed extremely despondent, quite miserable, and he recalls shouting out in anger to a couple of these people sitting there, or the people who were doing the things to the humans, "You can't do that. You can't treat our people like cattle." And being outraged, entirely outraged by whatever it was he had seen, but consciously only recalling the outrage, only recalling his protest, and not recalling what it was he had seen that generated this protest. Now, this account is also included in Masquerade, and it is one of the memories that Ted and Barbara have been able to explore with regressive hypnosis after the time that Masquerade was written. So we have more information to report on this, and I'll try to make sure that the report on all of our work that sheds new light on what we've already presented in Masquerade will get out to you as soon as possible. What Ted recalled at the time of the regressive hypnosis is, without doubt, outrageous and horrifying to any human sensibility. And I would remind you that such scenarios have not yet been shown to be a factual reality. I would also remind you that Ted is by no means the only person to have remembered such details of areas like these in this underground facility in which abductees report seeing human bodies physically processed, and that very similar accounts have come from other people's conscious recollections as well as from hypnotically retrieved descriptions. If such facilities don't exist, I think that we still have a big problem in understanding the nature of this phenomenon, because we should be concerned to understand why such a grisly, horrifying illusion would be presented to so many abductees, and what purpose that could conceivably serve for an alien agenda.